Exclusive, intel agencies scour reams of genetic data from Wuhan lab in COVID origins hunt. There's also a manpower issue. Not only do intelligence agencies need government scientists skilled enough to interpret complex genetic sequencing data and who have the proper security clearance, they also need to speak Mandarin, since the information is written in Chinese with a specialized vocabulary. Investigators both inside and outside the government have long sought genetic data from 22,000 virus samples that were being studied at the Wuhan Institute of Virology. That data was removed from the internet by Chinese officials in September 2019, and China has since refused to turn over this and other raw data on early coronavirus cases to the World Health Organization and the US. The question for investigators is whether the WIV or other labs in China possessed virus samples or other contextual information that could help them trace the coronavirus evolutionary history. A source familiar with the US investigation would neither confirm nor deny that any of the data pertaining to those 22,000 samples is among what US intelligence agencies are currently analyzing. No smoking gun. Sources familiar with the effort say filling in that missing genetic link won't be enough to definitively prove whether the virus originated in the lab at Wuhan or first emerged naturally. Officials will still need to piece together other contextual clues to determine the true origins of the pandemic. But it is a critical puzzle piece that the Biden administration has been prioritizing. Digging into the science. That's where the genomic data from the Wuhan lab could come in. Many scientists continue to believe that the most likely scenario is that the virus jumped from animals to humans naturally. But despite testing thousands of animals, researchers still haven't identified the intermediate host through which the virus passed as it adapted to humans. But some researchers, intelligence officials, and Republican lawmakers believe that researchers at the WIV might have genetically altered a virus in the lab, using a controversial kind of research known as gain-of-function that could have infected researchers who then spread it in their community.
It's also plausible that the initial infection took place naturally outside of the lab, perhaps while a scientist was collecting a sample from an animal in the wild, and that scientist then spread the virus unknowingly when he returned to the lab with the samples, multiple sources familiar with the intelligence explained. If it was the latter, it was likely brought into a lab to study because someone got sick. Which means there were an unknowable number of other people who were already sick, the source familiar with the probe said. Understanding exactly which viruses researchers at the WIV were working on could provide important evidence for any one of these theories. It's one of the reasons that investigators on Capitol Hill and elsewhere have been keenly focused on the database that was taken offline in 2019. But it might not prove anything definitively, sources familiar with the intelligence say. Even if scientists in the intelligence community are able to use the data from the lab to stitch together a complete genetic history that shows how the virus mutated, they might not have enough information about how it was handled by the Chinese lab to determine with a high level of confidence that it leaked. Despite having that complete history of variants, lack the contextual information to make sense of it in a narrative way, the source familiar with the investigation explained. Even a complete sequence history is difficult to obtain, and doesn't really tell us anything about the origins of the pandemic itself without the context, this person added. A bipartisan group of lawmakers on the Senate Intelligence and Foreign Relations Committees earlier this week sent a letter urging the administration to continue to prioritize the hunt until such a judgment can be made in order to prevent future pandemics. But the lawmakers also zeroed in on a related focus for intelligence officials probing the pandemic's origins: China's efforts to conceal the severity and scope of the outbreak of the SARS-CoV-2 virus that caused the COVID-19 pandemic.
We also believe that the investigation should address PRC efforts to prevent international inquiries into the origins of SARS-CoV-2 and other actions PRC authorities have taken to obscure the nature of the virus and its transmission, the lawmakers said. Republican lawmakers in the House, meanwhile, have latched onto the theory that the virus escaped from a lab. GOP lawmakers in a report released Monday by Rep. Michael McCall of Texas have claimed that the preponderance of evidence suggests the coronavirus was accidentally released from a lab in Wuhan in 2019. Intelligence officials say it's still far too soon to say.
Thank you for watching. Please subscribe